Coming up on Primetime News, the South Korean government lays out measures like cutting taxes on automobiles and home appliances to boost domestic spending. And South Korea's military lowers its highest alert level at the border as military tensions diffuse following a breakthrough deal between Seoul and Pyongyang. The deal between the two sides receives a round of applause in Korea and abroad. Washington says it supports President Park Geun-hye's efforts to improve inter-Korean ties. Stay tuned for these stories and more. Hello and welcome to Primetime News on this Wednesday, August 26th. I'm Hwang Ji-hye.
And I'm Daniel Choy. Thank you for joining us.
Inviting all members of the ruling Saenuri Party for a luncheon at her office, President Park Geun-hye, who marks the midpoint of her five-year term, said it's now time to focus on reviving the economy and reforming Korean society.
She specifically sought the party's cooperation in reforming the country's labor market aimed at creating more jobs and bringing down youth unemployment. The president also asked the ruling party lawmakers to do everything they can to get reform and economy-related bills passed in the upcoming regular parliamentary session.
She has put forth reforms in four major sectors involving public, labor, education, and finance as her top priorities for the second half of this year. Ruling party leader Kim Moo-sung pledged his party's support for President Park's reform drive. President Park will also attend the Chinese military's parade in Beijing in celebration of the 70th anniversary of Japan's surrender in World War II.
Her office says the president decided to attend the September 3rd event at the Tiananmen Square considering Seoul's friendly, cooperative relations with Beijing and hopes for Beijing's future role in bringing peace and unification on the Korean peninsula.
The presidential office in Seoul adds President Park's appearance will be in remembrance of Koreans' struggle for independence from Japan's colonial rule in China. On September 2nd, the first day of her three-day visit to China, President Park will hold summit talks with Chinese President Xi Jinping. And as part of efforts to boost the economy, Korea has unveiled plans to stimulate spending.
That's right. Those who are about to buy home appliances or automobiles may want to listen carefully about the measures that take effect Thursday. Song Ji-sun reports.
MERS, Middle East Respiratory Syndrome, has impacted Seoul more than last year's Hilda Ferry disaster in terms of recovering domestic consumption. Retail sales and the service sectors contracted at their sharpest rates in 4 years in June, with consumption sliding 0.3% from the first quarter. Deeming the recovery pace insufficient, Seoul announced new measures to rev up domestic consumption. Starting Friday, individual consumption tax on vehicles and large electronic goods like air conditioners will be reduced by 30% until the end of this year. This means the popular mid-size sedan Sonata will cost consumers about $420 less.
The benefits will only last until the end of the year for the reduction to be effective in boosting demand.
The Korea Grand Sale that started on 14th of August will continue well into October, as Seoul hopes to re-attract Chinese visitors to the country during China's National Day holiday that begins on the 1st of October. The Grand Sale will also be extended to traditional markets ahead of Korea's Chuseok holiday in September.
We want to create a boom in consumption that's been temporarily suppressed due to extraordinary circumstances.
Although the set of measures could reduce the amount of taxes collected, the government believes it could offset losses through increased consumer spending. Korea's finance ministry estimates that these measures will raise the country's annual economic growth rate by 0.025 percentage points. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
The two Koreas are lowering their defense posture after a breakthrough deal that was reached during inter-Korean talks held Tuesday. Military sources in Seoul say Pyongyang has been pulling their troops and heavy artillery back from the front line. For more on these developments, here's our Kim Hyun-bin.
The South Korean military has gradually lowered its defense posture from the highest alert level prompted by heightened tensions with North Korea earlier this month. A military source says that the maximum alert order sent to the frontline military units is being scaled down. The source, however, added that the soldiers will remain in position of higher readiness than normal as a precautionary measure as the annual Korea-U.S. Joint Defensive Drill is currently taking place. There are signs that North Korea is also lowering its alert level after lifting its quasi-state of war status on Tuesday. North Korean troops on the border are returning to their regular footing, while heavy artillery on the front line has also been returned to its normal stance from combat ready. Both Koreas agreed to defuse tensions on the peninsula after a breakthrough was reached in high-level talks on Tuesday between the two countries. The two Koreas exchanged artillery fire last week after North Korea fired shells targeting South Korea's loudspeakers. The South Korean military commenced its psychological warfare activities after Pyongyang's landmine blast on the south side of the border that severely injured two South Korean soldiers. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
Over at the National Assembly, a parliamentary defense committee reviewed the recent inter-Korean crisis with the nation's defense minister Han Minkoo attending the session. Park Ji-won has the details.
Lawmakers from both sides of the aisle praised the military's response during the recent inter-Korean confrontations, but grilled the defense minister on some specific details regarding the agreement reached by two Koreas on Tuesday. Some lawmakers questioned the clarity of the wording of the deal by the two Koreas. They particularly pointed out a clause in the agreement that states the South will stop its anti-Pyongyang propaganda broadcasts at the border unless abnormal situations happen. Han was asked on what could constitute abnormal and whether its meaning was agreed upon by both Koreas. To further illustrate the ambiguity of the word, lawmakers asked whether a cyber warfare or missile launches by Pyongyang fall into the criteria of being abnormal. To this, the defense minister said he cannot give an answer for now, adding that abnormal situation is something to be judged comprehensively by the government.
What I understand about an abnormal situation is that, while it's certain military provocations like this one will be considered an abnormal case, we need to comprehensively judge the situations rather than specifically predetermining which cases would be seen as an abnormal situation.
Lawmakers also questioned the defense minister about what South Korea earned through the crisis and the subsequent marathon negotiations.
I believe we've secured our national unity, that we will firmly respond to Pyongyang's provocations and clearly showed the North that we will punish any of their provocations. An improvement in inter-Korean relations is an additional achievement on our side.
However, lawmakers expressed concerns over Hwang Byungse, one of the two chief North Korean negotiators during the inter-Korean talks, who recently denied Pyongyang's involvement in the landmine attack in a TV interview broadcast in the North. Lawmakers said Hwang is not only giving North Korean viewers an opposite interpretation of the result of the inter-Korean talks, but even adding extra wording that was not stated in the original agreement. They asked the Defense Ministry to clarify the meaning and understanding of the agreement with the North to prevent differing opinions that could hamper improved inter-Korean relations. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
Resuming reunions for families separated by the Korean War was one of the agreements reached between the two Koreas at the recent high-level talks. South Korea plans to begin preparations to hold the event in time for the Chuseok holiday next month. Hwang Sung-hee has the details.
South Korea said Wednesday it will begin preparations for what could be the first set of separated family reunions in nearly 2 years.
The issue of separated families is one of the most urgent matters to be resolved. Through calm preparations, the government will work towards holding the family reunions in time for Chuseok.
The resumption of reunions for war-separated families was one of the inter-Korean agreement reached on Tuesday. Since Chuseok, or Korean Thanksgiving holiday, falls at the end of September this year, the two Koreas have less than a month for preparations. The two sides are expected to hold working-level Red Cross talks early next month to discuss the details. Millions of family members were separated by the Korean War in the 1950s, but time is running out for the elderly victims. Out of the nearly 130,000 registered divided family members in the South, more than 50% are over the age of 80, and nearly half have already passed away. In her Liberation Day speech a couple of weeks ago, President Park Geun-hye had urged the North to help arrange reunions as a way to rebuild trust between Seoul and Pyongyang.
이산가족 문제만큼은 아무리 정세가 어렵고 이념이 대립한다고 해도 인도적 견지에서 남북이 근본적인 해결 방안을 찾아야 합니다.
South Korean efforts to resume the reunions have always been hampered by North Korea's demands that it receive something in return, such as the lifting of sanctions. Although the working-level talks in September may not be smooth sailing, some say the resumption of reunions could play a key role in expanding humanitarian exchanges between the two Koreas. Hwang Ji-hye, Arirang News.
While some obsess and dwell on North Korea's expression of regret instead of apology over the recent mine incident, the U.S. actually says they've chosen to emphasize the importance of the two Koreas reaching an agreement through dialogue. Our Connie Kim has this report.
The White House has welcomed the interKorean agreement that eased heightened military tensions on the Korean peninsula. U.S. Deputy Press Secretary Eric Schultz said Wednesday, Washington supports President Park Geun-hye's tireless efforts to improve the two Koreas' relations. Schultz added that the U.S.-South Korea alliance remains firm and will continue to work closely together. However, the U.S. remained tight-lipped on whether North Korea's expression of regret in the interKorean agreement can be considered an apology for the landmine provocation that injured 2 South Korean soldiers. Speaking at a regular press briefing on Tuesday, U.S. State Department spokesman John Kirby said it was inappropriate for Washington to characterize the difference between the words regret and apology. Kirby instead chose to emphasize that an agreement was reached and that President Park Geun-hye found acceptable the expression made by Pyongyang. In the 6-clause agreement released by the two Koreas on Tuesday, Pyongyang's expression of regret over the landmine blast that severed the legs of 2 South Korean soldiers was key to the halting of South Korea's loudspeaker broadcasts at the border. Seoul said it views the expression as a de facto apology, but some critics argue that it's difficult to accept it as an apology, citing the fact that Pyongyang did not promise to prevent another such accident from happening. Following the two Koreas' announcement, the U.S. immediately hailed the breakthrough deal, saying it'll continue to work closely with Seoul to promote peace and stability on the Korean peninsula. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
In South Korea, the Park Geun-hye administration's latest deal to defuse tension with North Korea is winning back people's confidence. According to Postal Realmeter, nearly 61% of 500 people surveyed said Seoul did a good job, while only 16% said it didn't. Around 20% said they didn't know. On North Korea expressing regret for the recent landmine blast, 70% said they found it dissatisfactory, 24% felt otherwise. 72% said they accept the expression of regret as a form of apology. South Korea's Foreign Minister Byungse will hold talks with his U.S. counterpart John Kerry in Alaska at the end of this month. It will be their first meeting since the high-level agreement between the two Koreas earlier this week and their third one so far this year. According to a Seoul's foreign ministry official on Wednesday, they will meet on the sidelines of the 2-day conference on global leadership in the Arctic, which will kick off on Sunday in Anchorage. The exact date has not yet been set. The official added the ministers will discuss bilateral security cooperation, the South Korean leaders' trip to Washington in October, and other pending alliance issues.
In an effort to attract more foreign investment, South Korea's Trade Ministry has announced new deregulation plans to help attract $20 billion in foreign direct investment this year, equipping the nation's free economic zones to turn them into a hub for foreign investment. Seoul will help companies hire more foreign professionals by raising the quota to 30% of total employees from 20%. Those working in the medical R&D sector will also be allowed to stay up to 5 years instead of the current 3 years. The government will also set up logistics and business infrastructure to attract investors from China and the Middle East. Foreign direct investment in Korea is on the rise, logging $10 billion in mid-July. Chinese shares dropped to another low on Wednesday despite China's rate cut the day before that was supposed to aid in recovery. This adds to concerns it will remain a culprit for uncertainties in the global economy. Kwon So-ah has this report.
With no clear signs China's stocks will recover this week, concerns are growing the country once a main growth engine in the global economy is out of fuel. The move by China's central bank to lower its key interest rate Tuesday did not help stabilize the main index, but it did have an effect elsewhere. Following China's rate cuts, many markets across the globe have been rebounding. Here in Korea, the benchmark Kospi and tech-heavy Kosdaq closed almost 2.6% and 3.4% higher than on Tuesday. But some say the 0.25 percentage points cut, the fifth since November last year, may not be enough.
The measure itself was appropriate, but a cut by 0.5 to 0.7 percentage points would have been more effective, and it should have come before the Shanghai Composite crashed, below the psychologically important 3,000 mark.
Questions are also being raised whether China's stock meltdown will negatively impact the U.S., as its central bank is shortly expected to decide whether to raise its key interest rate, which sits near zero.
The odds of that rate hike have certainly been diminished by the magnitude and the veracity of the market reaction over the last week. That is to say, we could still certainly see them move.
Before China's crash, the question was whether the hike will come in September or not. But the fresh question is whether it could even happen later, even next year. It's the uncertainties in these two biggest economies in the world that need to be eased for other countries to stabilize. That's why analysts say it will take until next month to get a clearer picture of how much the turmoil coming from China is going to affect everyone in the long run. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
In some culture news now, even to avid fans of plays, musicals, or other types of performance arts, obstacles like schedule availability, locations stand in the way of catching a good show on a more regular basis. Our Kim Ji-yeon introduces us to a group of artists who may have some solutions to that problem.
What will it take to stop the tracks of pedestrians for them to enjoy a performance in an outdoor setting? Well, it may just take a few beats of the traditional percussion quartet, saenuri, or a miming piece.
When people decide to go see a play or a musical, it almost always takes place in an indoor venue where they're not familiar with. Add to that the tedious process of looking up performers' schedules, the purchasing of tickets, and figuring out parking, etc. So in the end, they feel like it's not worth all that hassle. So some performers instead decided to seek out their audiences, like here in the shopping district of Insadong. A series of such performance art pieces, dubbed Art Tracking, took place at some of the most crowded areas of Seoul on the so-called Culture Day, taking place on the last Wednesday of each month, designated by the government to make free or discounted cultural programs available to the public.
I haven't had the time to enjoy these kinds of performances because they are rarely available where I live, so it's really nice that I get to enjoy them here today.
For some, the street performances are regarded as part of efforts to create a domestic consumption culture for the arts by making them more appealing to the public. The president of the Korean National University of Arts, Kim Bong-yeol, says his institution produces world-class performers every year, but the majority of them go abroad to perform, inhibiting the country's potential in cultural development.
I think one's familiarity with various art forms, including performance art, is key to nurture creativity, which is an essential element for the country to become a cultural powerhouse.
Kim adds the institution will also host various events, including an exhibition on performance art at the Free Arts Platform Festival next month. Kim Ji-yeon, Arirang News.
And for today's international news headlines, we turn to our Lee-Sun-ho.
Sun-ho, could you tell us about the situation of migrants making their way into Hungary first?
Well, migrants continued to reach the Hungary border from Serbia on Wednesday. Some were seen walking along railway tracks, while others braved newly placed barbed wire fences along the border. Hungarian authorities placed the barbed wire along the border with Serbia, while construction crews raced to complete a 3.5-meter-high fence. The Balkans is in the midst of a surge in migration due to war in Syria and fighting across the Middle East, with refugees hoping to start a new life that is worth the risks.
I have a degree in accounting. My brother studied geology. And I want to build my future there. In Syria, they don't have future.
Now, in other areas of Hungary, migrants faced more difficulties as Hungarian police used tear gas to disperse crowds. Authorities say that over 140,000 migrants have entered Hungary from Serbia this year so far. And turning to France, authorities said that the suspect who carried out a shooting on a train was linked to extremist groups. The French prosecutor said that suspect Ayoub El-Kazani was once reported in Spain, went to Turkey, and wanted to go to Syria. El-Kazani has been accused of opening fire inside the train while traveling between Amsterdam and Paris last Friday. He was even watching a jihadi video just moments before the attack. El-Kazani was armed with an AKM rifle, 270 bullets, and a can of petrol. The suspect insisted that he had no shelter and was simply hungry. He claimed that he had no intentions of violence, just robbery. France also honored 3 U.S. citizens and 1 other from Britain on Monday who helped disarm the suspect at the scene. French President François Hollande said that they helped prevent a carnage. And lastly, U.S. Republican presidential hopeful Donald Trump stirred controversy yet again after an anchor of Univision, the largest Spanish-language broadcaster in the U.S., was ejected during a press conference on Tuesday.
No, you don't. You haven't been called. Go back to Univision. Go ahead.
Univision's Jorge Ramos, who remains an admired figure in Hispanic media, tried asking Trump a question regarding his views on immigration, but ended up being removed by bodyguards. Later on, however, the anchor was allowed back on in and proceeded to ask Trump over his controversial immigration policy. He accused Trump's plans of being full of empty promises, while the candidate said he would carry it out in a, quote, a humane fashion. The presidential hopeful continued his feud with Fox anchor Megyn Kelly, that is, in a tweet on Monday night. The Fox News channel chief urged him to apologize, but Trump retorted by saying that she should be the one to apologize over her actions during the first GOP presidential candidate debate. And that does it for your international news at this hour. I'll see you again tomorrow.
It felt like early autumn today with fresh breeze and cool temperatures, and tomorrow will be no different as daily lows will fall down to 20 in morning, and even Ponghwa County in Gyeongsang-do Province will be dropping down to 16, but highs will get up to upper 20s across the nation. Now, sporadic showers are forecast for the western parts of the peninsula between dawn and early tomorrow morning, but precipitation levels will be less than 5 millimeters, and it should let up as the morning moves along, and the skies will turn to partly sunny. On that note, let's take a closer look at the readings for tomorrow. Now, daily highs will be a couple of degrees higher than today, and Seoul and Busan will rise to 28, while Daegu and Gwangju top out at 29 and 27. And as for the other parts, it seems like Daejeon and Jeju Island will see a high of 28, while Dokdo gets up to 26. Now, the weather outlook for the next 5 days looks promising under mostly to partly sunny skies, but beware of big temperature difference between lows and highs. Well, that's all for the weather. Good night.
have come to the end of our newscast. Thank you for staying with us.
We'll be back same time tomorrow. Goodbye for now.